I'm 34, male, and I run a small security consultancy in a glassbox office that smells like ozone and coffee. If your servers are crying and your logs look like static, I'm the guy you call. I'm financially independent now. I buy groceries without checking my bank account. I get my car serviced before it screams at me. I sleep. That sounds like bragging, but it's not. It's context. Because last week, I did something that felt like stepping through a door and shutting it with both hands. And before I talk about the door, I have to talk about the house behind it, the one where the lights were always on and the power was always measured. My parents loved numbers. Not math, numbers. Totals. They loved receipts the way some people love family photos. We didn't have a gallery wall of awkward school pictures. We had a corkboard in the kitchen where Mom pinned grocery slips with pushpins like butterflies. She'd highlight them in yellow. Milk, $2. 49. Bread, $1. 19C? She'd say, tapping the paper with her nail. This is what it costs to keep you fed. I was 6 the first time I heard the roof over your head. Mom was at the sink, wrist deep in suds, and Dad was at the table, balancing a checkbook that never returned his gaze. I'd spilled apple juice, those thick, glass bottle kind that were a treat, and it ran sticky into the grooves of the table. Dad slammed the checkbook shut. Do you know what a roof costs? He asked me. His voice was soft. That made it worse. Every shingle, every nail. You're drinking roof money. We don't have extra for mistakes. Mom wrung the dishcloth like she was strangling it. We sacrifice for you, she said. And if you've never heard those words applied to a child, let me translate. A sacrifice is a debt. Someday you'll understand, and you'll pay us back. That's what good sons do. It became a refrain. Burned toast? Bread isn't free. New sneakers because my toes poke through the old ones? Do you think shoes grow on trees? The doctor's copay after I broke a finger on the monkey bars? Do you know what your hand cost us, mister? There was always a price tag, dangling, and the price was me. Dad kept a notebook he called the ledger in the junk drawer. It shared space with rubber bands, dull scissors, and loose screws. Guests would never have found it. The cover was black and scuffed, and he'd write in it with the gravitas of someone signing treaties. If I asked for a field trip fee, he'd flip it open and run his finger down columns. September, lunches, bus pass, jacket. We're already stretched, he'd say, scribbling a number I wasn't allowed to see. You owe us your gratitude, at least. Say thank you, Mom would echo. Thank you, I'd say. I learned to say it before I asked. They didn't hit me. Sometimes I think that would have been easier to explain. They did the nice parent act straight out of a sitcom when other people were around. Mom packed perfect lunches and cut sandwiches diagonally and called me honey in public, and Dad came to my school plays and laughed too loud at the parts where he thought laughter belonged. But at home, the laugh was a ledger entry. Gas isn't free, he'd say, putting the playbill on the counter. Next time, ask your teacher if you can be in a play at school. Closer. Once, at the grocery store, I asked if I could get a little carton of chocolate milk because the regular milk made my stomach churn in the morning if I didn't stir it up. Mom didn't glare. She smiled, pulled the tiny brown carton from the cooler and dangled it like bait. You want this? She asked. Do you know what this costs? She held it in front of my face so I could read the price tag, 79 cents. She dropped it in the cart anyway. At checkout, she set it aside and made me pay with the quarters from my pocket, tip money from bringing in the neighbor's trash cans. You should contribute, she said. It's important you learn. Love isn't letting you mooch. Love is work, Dad added, distracted, counting boxes of mac and cheese. Anyone who tells you different is selling something. We were church people in a strictly social sense. Potlucks and casseroles and folding chairs. The pastor loved family values and stories about prodigal sons who come home grateful. One Sunday when I was 10, Mom pressed a sealed envelope into my hand before the offertory. Put this in the plate, she whispered. It's your tithe. I'd never had an allowance. I thought maybe it was a gift. I slipped a thumb under the flap and peeked. Loose quarters. A note in Mom's looping hand for son's food. I dropped it into the plate like I was staging a magic trick where the punchline was me. When I got my first job at 13, paper route, Dad sat me down with a calculator like a right. He drew a circle on a napkin and divided it into wedges. 50% to household expenses, he said, shading a fat portion. 10 to savings, 10 to charity. You keep 30. It sounded adult, fair even. I like feeling useful. Then the first month came and Mom held out her hand. "Where's your contribution?" she asked, palm open like a donation jar. I gave her a wad of crumpled bills and she counted it, smoothing each one. She smiled when she put it in the black notebook. "Good boy," she said. "You understand your debt." I came home late one evening, soaked through from the rain, because my bag had split and papers became mush. I apologized at the door, dripping onto the mat. "Stop," Mom said, pulling my sleeve away from the floor. "You're ruining the tile. Do you know what tile costs?" She handed me the mop and set a bucket at my feet. "You'll pay for new if it warps." I was shivering hard enough to rattle, and she told me not to track emotions inside when I was spreading water. Birthdays weren't gifts, they were invoices. On my 12th, Dad taped a card shut with packing tape. Inside was a photocopy of the electric bill highlighted where the usage spiked. "Summer's hard," he said. "You keep leaving lights." Mom's gift was a coupon book she'd made with clip art. 1 Ride to school, valued at $3. 25 gin gas. 1 Load of laundry, valued at $2. 10 in water/electricity. "You have to present these," she warned, "or we charge you full price." It teaches responsibility. I learned to stop wanting. I learned to make myself small, to fold my desires into origami cranes and set them on the windowsill where dust would take them. When teachers asked what I wanted to be, I said useful. They laughed like I'd told a joke, and I laughed, too, because humor was a tip jar. I could hear quarters clinking. In high school, when college brochures started coming, Mom stacked them in a neat pile and adjusted it every time I looked away. "We'll help," she said. "Of course we will. But it's a loan, not a handout. We've been more than generous." Dad researched interest rates like vacations. "We'll keep track," he promised. We always have. Once, senior year, a guidance counselor called the house because I'd gotten into a state school with a partial scholarship. I heard Mom's phone voice float from the kitchen, "Honey and lemon. We're so proud," she said. "He's worked so hard." When she hung up, she set her smile down next to the salt shaker and looked at me like I'd taken something. "We'll talk about repayment terms," she said. "Don't sign anything until we make sure it doesn't interfere with what you owe." There were good moments. I need to say that so you don't imagine a dungeon with plaques for guilt. There were Saturday mornings when Dad made pancakes and tried to flip them too high, when Mom hummed along to the radio and let me lick batter off the spoon. There were jokes that landed, hugs that felt like real arms. I don't doubt they meant some of it. But a good moment is not a refund. It doesn't erase the ledger. It just changes the column header from charge to credit, and the balance remains, quietly compounding. People think abuse has to be loud. I thought that too. But the quiet can grind you down more efficiently than shouting ever could. The quiet finds your bones and writes numbers there. When I say I grew up in a house full of light, I mean every bulb was a reminder that someone would turn it off if I wasn't careful. The first time I realized other families didn't talk about kids like investments, I was at my friend Sean's house. We were studying for a biology exam, and his mom made us hot chocolate unprompted, extra marshmallows. She didn't ask for coins. When I said, "Thank you," she said, "You don't have to thank me for feeding you," and laughed like it was obvious. I felt hot and weird and uptight all at once. I went home and apologized to my parents for staying out late. Mom said, "Apology accepted," before I'd finished the sentence, and immediately asked for my pay stub for the file. That file grew. Report cards, copies of my W-2 from the paper route, doctor bills from the time I sprained my ankle, a printout titled "Cost of Raising a Child," government data, highlighted and annotated. Mom kept it in a plastic sleeve in the black notebook like scripture. On holidays, they'd bring it out in a joking way that wasn't a joke. "Look at this," Dad would say, tilting the page toward an aunt. $233,000. Kids these days don't know how lucky they are. Ours does, though. We've taught him well. Aunt Linda once said, "You don't bill your son for love," and Mom smiled with her teeth. "Love isn't free," she said. "We're just honest about it." When I think of my childhood, I think of the sound a calculator makes when the paper roll advances, that soft zip. I think of coins sorted by size. I think of gratitude like a tax you file early so you won't owe underpayment penalties later. I'm telling you all this not because I want pity, but because this is the ground I walked on. You don't change direction without noticing the floor. You don't measure a door without measuring the walls around it. I grew up believing that every kindness was a loan with interest. I learned to keep receipts from my own heart. Last week, there was a wire transfer and a note. That's later. For now, you should know this. I didn't leave because of one fight or one cruel sentence. I left because the ledger never closed, and I learned to balance my own. By junior year, I had a habit. If a room had a desk, I'd open the top drawer first. At home, it was the junk drawer. At school, it was the teacher's supplies. At my part-time job, it was the register. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the ledger under every surface, the place where the numbers lived. If I could find it first, maybe I could stop it from finding me. When I turned 16, Dad handed me an envelope like a promotion. Car insurance, he said. Inside was a printed quote with a sticky note. Your share, $78. 16/MO. I had just gotten hired at the grocery store, bagging and pushing carts. The first paycheck felt like oxygen. I wanted to buy a used hoodie that didn't have someone else's name inside the collar. Mom had a different shopping list. Room and board, she said, almost cheerful, tapping the black notebook. 50% of your take-home goes to the household. You agreed when you took the paper route. I didn't agree, I said, because I hadn't. You told me. Same difference, Dad said. You eat, you sleep, you contribute. There's a version of me that wanted to fight. That version golf swung a bag of returns into the break room trash and told my manager I needed more hours so I could move out by Friday. The real me nodded and handed over cash, then stood in the shampoo aisle counting quarters to see if I could afford the cheap brand that made my scalp itch. The manager walked by and joked, "Don't spend it all in one place." And I smiled because that was the tax. I'd study in the parking lot because the house was an abacus clicking. Saturdays, Dad would yell for me to come learn something useful, which meant watching him pay bills and narrate. See this? Heating. You keep your door closed. We pay for the heat and the privilege of your attitude. There were numbers I didn't understand. Interest, escrow, amortization. But the one I learned first was APR on guilt, compounding daily. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Patel, asked me one afternoon if my parents would come in to talk financial aid. They're frugal, I said carefully. They keep good records. That's not what I asked, she said, and the softness in her voice almost made me say too much. I think she saw it. We'll do what we can without them, she added. You don't need permission to apply for federal aid. At dinner that night, I tried to bring up FAFSA like it was weather. Mom misheard intentionally. FAFSA, she said slowly, as if tasting a spice, doesn't cover the real costs. Moving, groceries. A boy like you needs support. Will help, of course, but it's a loan. For percent interest. Family rate. She said it like generosity. Dad nodded. We'll draw up papers. I had an acceptance letter from the state school propped on my dresser like a window I might climb through. I'd run my fingers over the raised seal and imagine air that didn't smell like the ledger. Then Dad handed me a calculator. Let's decide if your degree is a good investment, he said. He typed in tuition numbers and living expenses and lost wages if you stayed home and worked. He didn't add in the cost of me. Senior spring, Sean's mom threw us a graduation barbecue. There were paper lanterns and a cooler with sodas and a blue cake that said "We're proud of you" in tinny frosting. People wrote cards. Aunt Linda gave me $50 and whispered, "For books or something fun, no strings." When I got home, Mom asked me to spread the cards on the table so she could write thank you notes. She opened the one from Aunt Linda and sked. "We'll put this toward your outstanding balance here," she said, slipping the money into an envelope labeled house. "Say thank you to Linda for contributing." I think she meant it for me, I said. "You are us," Mom said. "Don't get cute." The last week of August, Dad brought home a used desk for my room. "For your studies," he said. It was scuffed and the drawer stuck if you closed it fully. When I pulled it open, there was a ledger paper in the back, folded small. Not his. Mom's looping handwriting. Food, shelter, utilities, medical, transportation, MISC. Next to each, a total. At the bottom, total to date. A number that made my stomach drop. It was smaller than the government handout. They weren't accounting for their own high drama, but it was still absurd, and it was written like a prophecy. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3, I got up and sat at the desk. The house hummed. I took out a notebook, mine, and wrote at the top, what I OWE. Then I divided the page. Under debt, I wrote the things they said: bread, roof, gas, electric, the shirt on your back. Under ode to me, I wrote quiet. I wrote a door. I wrote room to want without a price. It looked stupid on paper. It felt less stupid in my lungs. 2 weeks later, the fight wasn't about money. It was about the car. Dad had let me borrow it to go to orientation, strict mileage tracking, fill the tank to the line. On the way back, a taillight went out, and a cop pulled me over. He gave me a warning. At home, Dad didn't ask if I was okay. He waved the paper. Do you know what a ticket would have cost? Insurance hike? You don't think. Mom watched me like a credit risk. Tomorrow you call the dealership and ask the price of a bulb, she said. You pay for it, and for our time to install. Time is money. I heard myself say, then it's cheaper to do it myself, and Dad's face changed. You don't talk back to investors, he said. Investors? It clicked. They didn't think they owned me. They thought they had equity, and I owed dividends. I left 2 months later. Leaving wasn't cinematic. No duffel bag stuffed with dreams. No shouted, I'm 18, you can't stop me. I stacked my shifts. Morning at the grocery store, afternoons sweeping at a car wash, evenings bussing tables at a diner that paid in wrinkled fives and soft serve. I Googled cheap rooms on a library computer and found a basement studio that smelled like damp and fried onions. The landlord, a tired woman with a cat named Mr., asked for first and last and looked at my pay stubs like I'd presented origami. You seem responsible, she said. Don't let Mr. out. I told my parents after I'd signed the lease. I met them in the kitchen because there's no other room where money sounds more like silverware. I found a place, I said. I move next week. Dad's eyes went to the ceiling, to the roof he'd paid for. After everything, he said. Mom went quiet long. Then she said, we'll need your forwarding address. For statements. Statements? I asked. For the balance. She pointed at the drawer where the black notebook lived. You think you can just walk away from a bill? I'll keep in touch, I lied. Just not like that. She folded a dish towel until it was a perfect rectangle and set it down like a contract. You'll regret this, she said, not angry, just certain. The world is expensive. The world was expensive. My first night in the basement, the pipe banged like someone knocking to be let in, and something with too many legs skittered across the wall. The mattress felt like it had bones, and the window let in the whisper of traffic and a slice of sky. I lay there and listened to none of their appliances, and I cried, ugly and quiet, because it was my turn to pay everything. Then I slept. Work was a treadmill. Wake up, gritty-eyed at 5, push carts in summer heat and winter slush, trade caffeine for lunch to save $3, wash the smell of fryer oil from my hair, study at midnight with a cracked coffee mug that said world's okayest son that I'd bought at a thrift store because irony felt like a cheap luxury. I took classes at community college because tuition at the state school was a number that made my throat close. I bought used textbooks with highlighted lies and made flashcards out of diner order slips. Mom called the first week, then the second, then every other day. How's our little independent man? She'd ask, and then talk about bills. You haven't sent anything toward your balance, she said once, prettily. Even a token shows good faith. I'm paying rent, I said. Your rent is to us, she said. Everything else is extra. Dad left voicemails with itemized lists of what I was forgetting. Your car registration is due. Have you factored that into your budget? Are you getting your money's worth out of those classes? You know you could live here for less. At the diner, a man left me a 10 on an $11 tab and told me to smile more. My manager, Sal, slid me a plate of fries like contraband and said, you look like a kid who needs a plan. He wasn't wrong. On my lunch breaks, I started a spreadsheet, library computer, flash drive I guarded like a relic. I put in everything I spent, rent, bus pass, cat treats for Mr. when he snuck into my door and cried. I built a second tab labeled what they say IOWE. I found the USDA's cost of raising a child estimates and BLS inflation calculators and bookmarked them. It felt like treason and communion at once. If I ever had to pay them back, I thought, I'd do it on my terms and precisely. Sean and I drifted. He went to the state school and posted photos of dorm pizza and foam parties. I double-tapped and then went to my second job. Once, late, when I was waiting for the bus and the wind went right through my coat like the fabric had holes I couldn't see, I saw a family through a lit window. A toddler threw a spoon and the mom laughed and picked it up and no one shouted about the cost of spoons. I stared like a creep until my bus came, And then I got on and gripped the pole like it could keep me from washing down a drain. There were small victories. The first time I paid rent and had $50 left. The first community college A in a class with a professor who wrote, "I can see the work here." The day I replaced my own taillight bulb with a video in 10 minutes and no ledger. I called Mrs. Patel and left a thank you on her voicemail for telling me to apply for aid anyway. I stopped answering my parents' calls after 10 p.m. because their voices at night made dreams into invoices. They showed up at the diner once. Mom in a cardigan like armor, Dad with the black notebook tucked under his arm. They sat in my section. I wanted to ask Sal to swap, but he was in back. I put Waters down. Mom smiled like a commercial. "Get us 2 club sandwiches. And, oh, we'll do dessert. We're celebrating your independence." When the bill came, Dad pulled out the notebook and clicked a pen. "We'll leave cash," he said. "But not a tip. Tips are optional." He looked at me. "We're not in the habit of paying you twice." Sal appeared beside me like a shield. "Our servers live on tips," he said blunt. "House policy is 20% on comps." Dad bristled. "We are not the house." Sal shrugged. "Then don't eat here." They left $1. I didn't chase them. I took the walk-in's cold air in the face until my eyes stopped burning. Later, I found Mom had slipped a folded sheet into my apron pocket, her perfume cloying. It was a statement. At the bottom, in red pen, "Don't forget who feeds you." That night, I opened my spreadsheet and added a new column, "Paid in full, someday." I didn't know how or when. I only knew that if love was a transaction to them, then I would settle it like a clean exit clause. No renegotiation. No more late fees of my heart. I learned to like the sound of my own machines, the hiss of the bus, the clatter of the diner dish pit, the little fan in the library that rattled when the woman 2 terminals down clicked too hard. The sounds you make yourself are less frightening than the ones you owe. I kept my own ledger, not with numbers carved into me, but with choices. Windows I could open, lights I could leave on, a door I could close. And the first time I did, quietly and on purpose, was when my phone lit up with MOM and I watched it go to voicemail. I didn't feel guilt. I felt subtraction. A cleaner balance. A threshold. The thing no one tells you about cutting your parents off, halfway, anyway, is how much noise lingers. You think silence will come quick, like pulling a plug. But it doesn't. It drips. You unplug one cord, and another hums somewhere under the floor. I blocked their late-night calls, but they switched to email. I blocked the emails, they sent letters. Not the kind with love or stories. Statements. Lists. Numbers circled in red. The language of debt collectors, but dressed in the clothes of family. I kept the envelopes for a while in a shoebox under my bed, like proof I wasn't imagining it. Food, for $1,820. Medical, $2,115. Clothing, $1,700. Each one had a new balance forward, like I was their Visa account. Sometimes, when Mr. the Cat came sniffing around my room, I'd shuffle the box to the top shelf because I was embarrassed for him to see. The letters slowed once I stopped replying. But the guilt didn't. Guilt's a phantom limb. Even when you cut off contact, you feel it itch. I'd be at work, scraping plates into a gray tub, and hear Mom's voice. "Do you know what that waste costs?" I'd pour a customer's 3rd refill of coffee and hear Dad. "Gas isn't free." My head was a ledger with no off switch. The grind became routine. Morning shift bagging groceries, 2 buses to class, diner until midnight. Some days I'd wedge in the car wash gig, scrubbing hubcaps until my arms shook. I kept a crumpled granola bar in my pocket like a talisman. When I felt dizzy, I'd nibble. When it was gone, I'd chew gum and tell my stomach to shut up. I wasn't the only one hustling, but it felt like I was the only one doing it with a meter running behind me. Friends complained about textbooks being overpriced. I agreed, but in my head I thought, at least you don't have to tack on the cost of existing with every chapter. Then came a small, stupid miracle. A professor in Intro to Networking, bald guy with glasses who wore ties that looked stolen from his dad, pulled me aside after class. "You get this stuff," he said. "Ever think about certifications? There's a shortage of people who actually understand security." I laughed because I thought he was joking. I barely had enough money to pay for my community college credits, let alone cert exams. He saw my face. "Check the library. They've got voucher programs. Doesn't hurt to ask." That night I Googled it. He wasn't lying. If you could prove financial need, You could get exam vouchers covered by workforce grants. I filled out the forms at 2 a.m. with shaking hands because admitting financial need felt like writing "I am broken" on an official document. But a month later, a letter came back, approved. The first cert I studied for on breaks at the diner. My flashcard smelled like fry oil. I sat for the exam in a testing center where the proctor made me turn my pockets inside out like I was smuggling answers. I passed. I walked out into a parking lot filled with cracked asphalt and cigarette butts and felt taller than the lampposts. Work didn't magically change. I still scraped gum off plates and wrangled carts in the rain. But my brain had a new ledger. Each cert was a coin in a jar marked escape. Every time Mom's phantom voice whispered about the cost of raising you, I pictured dropping another coin into that jar and closing the lid. Still, I couldn't shake the old math. Every time I had a little extra, tips, refund check, random 20 from a lucky scratch ticket, I had to fight the instinct to send it to them. It was like muscle memory. You owe. You pay. I never sent a dime, but the urge sat heavy, like an unpaid utility. The shoebox of letters started to smell musty. One night, I took it outside to the alley behind the building. I lit a match, watched the envelopes curl and blacken, numbers turning to ash. Mr. Meowed at the window, yellow eyes glowing. I wanted to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt like I was burning evidence at a crime scene. The grind stretched years. Community college, transfer, bachelor's. Each step felt like climbing a staircase where the risers were greased. People quit around me, dropped out, moved back in with their parents. It's easier, they said. For me, that wasn't an option. Moving back meant re-entering the ledger, and I'd rather drown in debt than let them balance the books in their favor. By 26, I landed my first real job, entry-level security analyst. The office was beige, and the boss wore polos tucked into khakis like armor, but it was salaried. With benefits. Health insurance I didn't have to apologize for using. When the HR lady explained PTO, I nearly laughed in her face. Paid time off felt like witchcraft. My parents heard through the grapevine. Aunt Linda, probably. Mom left a voicemail. We're so glad you've turned out. We knew you'd make us proud. When you have a chance, let's sit down and talk about repayment. Her voice was honey, but the word repayment hung sharp, like a hook. I deleted the voicemail. Saved the transcript. Added repayment to my mental ledger under debt. Life got less desperate, but not easy. I lived in a one-bedroom with a carpet that smelled like wet dog even though no dogs had been there. I bought a couch from Craigslist that sagged in the middle like a hammock. But it was mine. No ledger attached. I paid bills, cooked pasta, studied for more certs. My resume fattened. So did my savings account. Then one day, sitting at my desk in that beige office, I realized something terrifying and liberating. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of rent, not of bills, not of them. For years I'd been running from a balance I could never see. But now, for the first time, I thought, what if I paid it? Exactly. Down to the cent. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. If they wanted a transaction, I'd give them one. Not a penny more. That night, I dug out my old spreadsheet. Added tabs. Cross-referenced government reports with receipts I remembered, with average costs from the years I'd lived at home. I worked formulas until my eyes blurred. It wasn't about generosity. It was about precision. Somewhere between columns of food and medical and shelter, I realized my hands weren't shaking. For the first time in decades, the ledger wasn't theirs. It was mine. And once the numbers balanced, I'd be free. The first night I opened the spreadsheet for real, it felt like breaking into a safe. The kind of thing you do with a balaclava and adrenaline. Except it was just me, my laptop, and a can of discount energy drink sweating rings onto my desk. I stared at the blank cells until the cursor blinked like a dare. They want repayment, I thought. Fine. Let's make it exact. I started with the obvious, food. The USDA has tables, average annual food costs for children by age, adjusted by income brackets. I dug through archives like an archaeologist sifting for bones. For ages 0 to 5, $1,200 a year. Ages 6 to 11, closer to $1,900. Ages 12 to 17, over $2,300. I copied the data into rows, adjusted for inflation, and dragged the formulas down. The numbers felt sterile, detached. That was the point. Clothing came next. Government estimates again. $400 to $600 a year, depending on age, inflation adjusted. I thought of my shoes with cardboard jammed inside to cover holes, of Mom making me pay for chocolate milk out of pocket, and my hand almost twitched toward rounding down out of spite. But no, accuracy was the weapon here. Cold precision. Housing was trickier. They'd always said the roof over your head, like shingles were sacred currency. I pulled average costs per square foot from census data, then divided by household members. Conservative. Fair. I didn't tack on interest. I didn't pad it. Just math. Medical. I remembered every copay they'd made a show of sighing over. Stitches in my chin when I was 7. The inhaler I had to ration in high school, because those things aren't cheap. I checked average out-of-pocket expenditures by household income. Entered them year by year. Transportation. Bus passes until I could drive. Gas for the old sedan Dad said I owed miles for. I used AAA's historic cost per mile. Conservative again. Education. School fees, field trips, supplies. All the permission slips Mom signed with size. Average annual expenditures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Every category had a tab. Every year had a row. It took weeks. I'd come home from work, heat up ramen, and dive into numbers until midnight. Sometimes I'd wake up with the keyboard marks pressed into my cheek. There were moments I almost laughed, like when I calculated the average annual toy expenditure and realized how far below the line we must have been. They'd acted like buying me a $10 action figure was akin to financing a yacht. Yet the data said otherwise. The government's estimate for miscellaneous child costs in 1998 alone was more than I'd ever seen spent on me in a year. Still, I didn't discount. I kept their ledger honest, even if they never had. By the end, I had a number. Big, yes, but finite. Not some vague infinity they could dangle over me forever. Just digits, commas, a total at the bottom. I stared at it, waiting to feel dread. Instead, I felt steady. It was like standing at the edge of a canyon and realizing the distance across is measurable. You could even, given the right tools, build a bridge. I saved the file in 3 places: laptop, encrypted drive, cloud storage. Named it clean_break. XLSX. Then I sat back and thought about timing. I could have cut the check right then, but something in me wanted patience. Wanted them to wait. Because for decades, I'd been the one under the thumb of someday. Someday you'll repay us. Someday you'll understand. Someday you'll regret leaving. Now my someday had teeth. So I waited. I built. I climbed ladders at work, earned promotions, took on projects that scared the hell out of me. I went from analyst to consultant. From consultant to running my own small firm. Each milestone fattened my account, and with it, the certainty. One day, the transfer wouldn't even dent me. That was important. I didn't want to buy freedom with my last dime. I wanted to buy it like gum at the register, thoughtlessly, easily, so I could walk away chewing. During those years, their attempts didn't stop. The letters dwindled, but every so often I'd get a call from a new number. I'd pick up, and Mom's voice would slither through, saccharine. "We just want to see how you're doing," she'd say. Then, after 2 minutes, "Don't forget the balance. We're patient, but not eternal." Dad once sent an email with a PDF attachment titled Outstanding Debts. It had clip art of a piggy bank on the first page. I almost admired the commitment. Almost. I never replied. But I kept the emails. Each one was fuel. Proof. A record that this wasn't paranoia, it was policy. Then, one night, about a decade after I'd left, I pulled up clean_break. XLSX again. My income had doubled twice since the last time I'd opened it. The number at the bottom of the spreadsheet looked smaller now, like a bully who'd shrunk with age. I checked it line by line, adjusted for inflation one last time. The final total glowed at me. This was it. This was the sum of my childhood in their eyes. Not laughter, not scraped knees, not my name on the honor roll. Just a dollar amount. So be it. I logged into my bank, scheduled a wire transfer, entered their joint account number, the same one they used to make me deposit my teenage paychecks, for safekeeping. In the memo line, I typed 2 words, debt repaid. Then I clicked confirm. The confirmation screen popped up. Transfer pending. Estimated time, 1 business day. I thought I'd shake. I didn't. I thought I'd cry. I didn't. I just closed the laptop, turned off the light, and went to bed. Slept dreamless. The next morning, I woke up lighter. Not ecstatic, not giddy, just clear. like I'd showered off years of invisible grime. The money left my account. It was a lot, but it didn't hurt. I'd made sure of that. That evening, I blocked them everywhere. Phone, email, social media, even the LinkedIn profiles they used like phishing hooks. Sending, "We're proud of our son," posts to mutual acquaintances. Gone. Cut. No goodbye. No explanation. Just balance zeroed. Ledger closed. And for the first time in my life, I owed nothing. The morning after the transfer cleared, I woke up the same way I always did. Alarm buzzing at 6, Mr. pawing at my chest for breakfast, lights slanting through the blinds in weak bars. But something was different. It took me a second to recognize it. The background hum was gone. That constant, low-grade static of owing, of waiting for the next shoe to drop, it wasn't there. The silence was almost eerie. I poured my coffee, scrolled through headlines, and didn't think about them until my phone lit up with a call. The contact name just said MOM, because no matter how many times I changed phones, the number always snuck back in. Normally, I'd hit ignore, but this time I watched it ring calm, because I knew exactly what she was calling about. She left a voicemail. Her tone was syrupy sweet, but I could hear the sharp edges underneath. "Well, we got your transfer. It's unexpected. I suppose thank you is in order. But, sweetheart, money doesn't cover everything. You think this clears the balance? Life isn't that simple. We raised you, we sacrificed, we..." I stopped listening there. Deleted it. 2 hours later, another voicemail. This time, her voice was brittle. "You don't just wipe away love like a utility bill. This isn't closure, it's cruelty. Call us back. We need to talk about terms." Terms. Always terms. That evening, Dad tried. His voice was flat, accountant cold. "The amount you sent doesn't reflect true costs. You've underestimated. We'll be in touch with the revised total. Don't think you can wash your hands of us this way." I blocked both numbers. Emails came next. Different subject lines, all variations on the theme, outstanding balance. Further discussion required. You can't just walk away. I filtered them to spam. Out of curiosity, I peeked at one. It was a PDF, a fresh statement, except this one had my transfer listed as a partial payment. Like they'd posted it against the account and were now billing me for the rest. I laughed, really laughed, out loud, sitting alone at my desk, shoulders shaking. Not bitter or broken, genuine amusement. Because for the first time, their game looked ridiculous. The mask had slipped. It was all so nakedly transactional. And I'd played the last card. The letters followed. Thick envelopes, stuffed with paper. Some typed, some scrawled. Mom's looping cursive ran across page after page about betrayal and abandonment. Dad's pages were just numbers, itemized like grocery receipts. I didn't open most of them. I shredded them into confetti. Mr. loved playing in the paper pile, batting strips across the floor. Aunt Linda called me once, gently. "They're saying you settled up with them? Is that true?" "Yes," I said. "And now you've cut contact?" "Yes." She sighed. Not judgmental, just tired. "They're spinning it like you're ungrateful." "I paid every penny they ever claimed I owed," I said, steady. And then I walked away. There was a long pause. Then she said, softly, "Good for you." That was it. No lecture, no guilt trip. Just that. I nearly cried after I hung up. The rest of the family split down predictable lines. Some cousins reached out, quietly supportive. Others parroted my parents' lines. "Family doesn't have price tags. You don't just cut ties." The irony burned, because they had never seen the Black Notebook, never heard the words "roof over your head" said like an invoice. But I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Silence was my reply. Weeks went by. The calls stopped. The letters slowed. I'd expected rage to fester, some nuclear retaliation. Instead, there was nothing. Just absence. A hole where their noise used to be. And in that hole, I grew. I noticed things I hadn't before. How I could leave a light on in the kitchen while I read in the living room, and no one yelled about the electric bill. How I could buy name-brand cereal because I liked the taste, not because it was on sale. How I could get sick and actually use my insurance without feeling like I was draining an account. I started therapy. First time in my life. I sat in a clean office and told a stranger about ledgers and receipts and chocolate milk cartons, and she didn't look at me like I was insane. She nodded, took notes, said words like financial abuse and conditional love. I hadn't realized those were terms. I thought it was just my private language of debt. I began to understand that what I'd done wasn't petty, wasn't cruel. It was precise. It was closure. They'd raised me to believe everything was a transaction. So I gave them exactly what they asked for, the final payment. And then I severed the account. The relief was strange. Not explosive, not cinematic, just steady, like a clean breath after years of smog. One night, I went for a walk in my neighborhood. Just a mild evening, streetlights buzzing, kids on bikes laughing. I passed a corner store, stopped inside, bought a small carton of chocolate milk. The kind I hadn't been allowed as a kid. 79 cents, same as back then. I paid with cash, drank it on the curb, and laughed when the mustache formed on my lip. That's when it hit me. The real revenge wasn't the transfer. It was this: living free, enjoying something simple without calculating its cost in parental debt. The transfer was just punctuation. The life after was the sentence. And for the first time in 34 years, I realized the sentence was mine to write. At first, I expected escalation. My parents had never lost control of the narrative before, and I'd just torn the pen out of their hands. I thought there would be door-pounding visits, lawsuits, maybe even one of those dramatic, estranged child kidnaps their own parents' love posts on Facebook meant to draw sympathy. I braced for it. Checked my building's entryway cameras every morning. Made sure my office admin knew not to buzz in anyone without ID. But the storm never came. After the first flurry of voicemails and statements, the noise dwindled. The inbox went quiet. The mailbox stopped coughing up thick envelopes. The phone stayed dark. It was almost anticlimactic. And then, something unsettling. I realized how much space they'd been occupying in me, even when they weren't around. That constant anticipation, the waiting for the next guilt trip bomb to drop. It was a form of living with them even while living apart. When the noise stopped, there was a silence I didn't know what to do with. The first week, the silence felt like walking into a house after a power outage. Everything dark, fridge humming dead, clocks blinking zeros. Wrong. Temporary. The second week, I started sleeping better. Deep, heavy sleep, the kind where you wake up and don't remember dreams because your brain was finally resting. By the third week, I realized something. Silence isn't absence. Silence is room. I began to fill that room with other things. Therapy became a standing appointment. My therapist, Drive S, never gasped or looked scandalized when I described the ledger, the receipts pinned like trophies, the coupons for birthday presents. She just said, that wasn't love. That was accounting. Hearing someone else put it so bluntly cracked something open in me. I started journaling. At first it was messy lists, things I could do without permission, without debt. Leave a light on. Take a shower longer than 5 minutes. Order dessert without guilt. Then it grew into reflections. What it felt like to hand over paychecks at 16, what it meant to call a basement apartment mine, even with mold in the corners. The page became a counter ledger, my life, but written in my handwriting, not theirs. Work thrived. My little consultancy expanded. Word spread in tech circles that I wasn't just competent, I was meticulous. Funny how the very skills I honed surviving their itemization translated into my career. Every vulnerability, every overlooked line of code, I caught it. Clients trusted me, paid me well. For once, my obsession with detail wasn't for survival. It was for success. With stability came softness. I adopted a second cat, a scraggly rescue with half an ear, because Mr. seemed lonely. I named her Balance. A joke just for me. Mr. and Balance curled together on the couch like a yin-yang, and sometimes I'd look at them and feel a weight in my chest so unfamiliar I couldn't name it at first. Eventually I realized, peace. My parents didn't give up entirely, of course. A year after the transfer, a letter slipped through. Handwritten, bulky with folded pages. The outside read, open, important family matter. I didn't open it. Dropped it straight into the shredder. I didn't even feel curiosity. Just calm, like brushing lint off a sleeve. Another time, a Facebook message came from an old neighbor. Your folks keep asking about you. They said you're confused, that you think money settles everything. I thought you should know. I replied once. They got exactly what they asked for. Nothing less, nothing more. That chapter is closed. Then I muted the conversation forever. The strangest part? I didn't miss them. Not once. People talk about estrangement like a wound that aches. But for me, it was more like finally taking off a pair of shoes that were 2 sizes too small. The absence wasn't pain, it was relief. In therapy, I admitted a fear. What if they die and I feel nothing? Drive S looked at me and asked, What if that's okay? It had never occurred to me that indifference could be acceptable, that I wasn't required to feel grief to prove I was human. So I practiced indifference. Not cruelty, not malice. Just letting go. When a thought about them surfaced, I pictured myself setting it down like a stone. The pile of stones grew smaller as the months passed. On my 35th birthday, I threw myself a party. Nothing extravagant, just friends, co-workers, cats weaving between legs. But it was the first birthday that wasn't a receipt, wasn't a coupon book of conditional favors. My gift to myself was simple. I bought a ridiculously overpriced cake, the kind with too much frosting and gold leaf flakes. I lit candles, blew them out, and for the first time didn't think about the cost of the wax. Someone asked me, halfway through the night, "So, do your folks live nearby?" I didn't flinch, didn't stumble. I just said, "No contact," and changed the subject. That's the real aftermath. Not the drama of slammed doors or screaming matches, but the gradual rewiring of your brain to see them as irrelevant. To stop being their accountant. To stop carrying their ledger in your blood. When I finally looked back at clean_break XLSX, months later, I wasn't interested in the total anymore. I deleted the file. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need it. The debt wasn't just repaid, it was erased. The silence had become the proof. And for the first time, I realized freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. It's been a few years since I hit send on that transfer, and every so often I catch myself asking, was that the revenge? Or was it something else? I don't think in terms of revenge anymore. At least not the cartoon version. The grand gesture. The dramatic confrontation where the villain is humiliated and the audience claps. My parents didn't get a moment like that. There was no shouting match, no door slammed in their faces. Just a number in their account and the silence of a son who finally stopped answering. And yet, it was revenge in its cleanest form. I gave them exactly what they asked for, nothing more, nothing less. No interest, no affection bundled into the payment, no open line for renegotiation. Their ledger closed, my balance at zero. They couldn't guilt me anymore, because there was nothing left to charge. But the real triumph wasn't the money. It was what came after. I look around my life now, my apartment, my business, my cats curled like commas on the couch, and I see something my parents never understood. This isn't debt. It isn't owed to anyone. It's mine because I built it. Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, sleepless night by sleepless night. Every meal I cook, every bill I pay, every light I leave on without flinching. These are receipts written in my name only. People sometimes ask about my family, and I keep it short. No contact. If they push, I add. They kept a ledger on me. That usually shuts people up because they can't imagine it. Parents who treat love like a balance sheet, but I don't feel the need to convince anyone. The truth doesn't require witnesses. Therapy has taught me to stop rewriting the past in my head. For a long time I replayed every scene, wondering if I could have spoken up sooner, fought harder, escaped earlier. Now I see those thoughts for what they are, ghosts trying to keep me in the old house. The truth is, I left when I could, and leaving saved me. Drive S asked me once, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I thought about it for a long time. Forgiveness implies a debt, too, a moral one. It suggests I owe them closure, that I need to sign off on their mistakes like a line item. But I don't. Forgiveness isn't required. Freedom is. And I already claimed that. Sometimes I wonder what they tell people about me now. Probably that I'm ungrateful. That I paid them off, like they were some kind of loan shark. That I abandoned family for money. Maybe they even spin the transfer as proof of their sacrifice. See, he recognized what we gave him. But their version of the story isn't mine to control, and it doesn't matter anymore. Because no matter what they say, I know the truth. They wanted repayment, and they got it. They wanted to reduce parenthood to numbers, and I honored their math. Now, I live outside their equations. The best part? I don't think about them much anymore. When I do, it's not with anger. It's with distance, like recalling a house you once lived in that's been torn down. You can walk by the empty lot and say, "I used to live there," but it doesn't hurt. It's just history. And love, real love, doesn't live in ledgers. I see that now in small, ordinary moments. A friend shows up at my door with soup when I'm sick. A coworker stays late to help me debug code, no questions asked. A neighbor waters my plants when I travel. None of them present me a bill afterward. None of them keep score. That's what love looks like. Not free, Exactly, but freely given. No interest. No repayment schedule. Just care. On the anniversary of the transfer, I bought myself another carton of chocolate milk. Not out of spite this time. Out of ritual. I drank it slow, sitting on my balcony, watching the city hum beneath me. The carton cost me $1.09 this time. Prices go up, but no one hovered over me with a notebook. No one asked if I knew what milk costs. I did, and I paid it gladly. That's the closure, not the act of paying them off, but the freedom to pay for myself without guilt, to exist without owing, to breathe without calculating. Sometimes I imagine a younger version of me, 6 years old, sticky from apple juice, head bowed while Dad lectured about shingles and roofs. If I could go back, I'd crouch beside him and whisper, "You won't always live in their ledger. Someday you'll balance it. Someday you'll close it. Someday you'll walk away, and the only balance left will be peace." And then I'd take his hand, lead him out the door, and not look back. Because love isn't a transaction. Parenthood isn't a bill. And freedom isn't granted. It's taken. I took mine. And I don't owe anyone a damn thing.